What's up, FOMOfanz? Welcome back to another episode of the FOMOfanz podcast. As always, my name is Brian Fanzo, founder, CEO of iSocialFans. And on this episode, guys, we're going to do something a little different. I spent about 20 hours doing research. I won't even say research. I've been studying. I've been taking notes. I've been watching. I've been listening. I even listened to a podcast about this. I'm really going to break down and share my thoughts and take around the Fyre Festival. For those of you guys that have watched the documentaries or you remember what was going on in 2017. And I'm really going to try to break this down from a standpoint of how I looked at it, what I was consuming, but even more so direct business examples of things that we can learn from, not only from the festival itself, but really what the documentaries highlighted. And then I'm also going to talk about the documentaries themselves because I was not only was I insulted by some of the take or the spin of the documentaries, but I also felt there needs to be someone speaking back about this or kind of calling this out. And I think, unfortunately, in this world we're living in right now, so many opinions for people are agenda based, and I think that's unfortunate because we as marketers oftentimes can see through that. We can see through why people are talking about one thing or why people are doing things. I mean, we had the Gillette ad that just recently happened, and there's always seems to be an agenda behind it, and I would say not always an agenda behind the brand, but oftentimes an agenda behind the strategy or even an agenda behind people's take. And I'm going to try my very best on this episode to not be agenda driven, more of me kind of just calling a spade, putting things out there that I saw. But I'm also going to share my thoughts on where I thought people are highlighting wrong. I mean, let's face it, this festival, the Fyre Festival, for what it was a shit show. I mean, it was a shit show, and it was run by a con man that is an experienced con man that had pulled off multiple cons before. But I think, weirdly enough, people are using this as or highlighting this as the norm, or highlighting this as, yep, those damn millennials, or that's why influencer marketing doesn't work, or here we go again, shitty social media. And I want to take it away from that. I want to say, what can we learn from this experience, this problem that happened? But also, this is a major mistake. This is a major catastrophe, but at the same time, it's something we can learn from, and it's just one bad apple, right? There's plenty of good examples, and that's really where I'm gonna twist and take this. But for those that really aren't familiar, quickly, the Fyre Festival was an event that happened in 2017 in the Bahamas. It was kind of promoted in 2016. It came to fruition from this guy named Billy McFarland, who the documentaries kind of highlight. And to fast forward, he ended up being sentenced to jail for 6 years on fraud charges, and I'll get more than that. But he collaborated with Ja Rule, the rapper, and those that are went to high school in the 90s. Ja Rule was one of the big rappers in our day, but Ja Rule and Billy McFarland came together and with this idea of launching a festival in the Bahamas that no one had ever done before. But the reason, and I want to break down lots of different things here, but what had happened is they launched this festival, but really they had no idea how to pull it off. They lied and scammed people out of money. People ended up flying down there. When they got there, it wasn't anything like they thought it was. They were using disaster recovery tents instead of the villas that they had bought. They used influencers and models to shoot this promotional video. They paid people like Kylie Jenner $200,000 to promote this event on their Instagram channel. But ultimately, the big thing about it was it just didn't happen. It was a failure across the board. The musicians backed out. The event really never happened. People got scammed out of their money. The locals that were working there got screwed out of all the time and money that they were working on. Even the investors, $20 million worth of investors, were screwed out of it. But I want to take a step back, and I want to kind of start over from, kind of looking at this. And just to put it in perspective, I watched the Netflix documentary that came out on this event. It was about an hour-and-a-half documentary, and the documentary was actually done by Vox and Jerry Media, which is better known as Fuck Jerry, was the agency that was hired by Fyre Festival to put on this event. So they were the ones that did the documentary on Netflix. And then I watched the Hulu documentary, which Hulu put on this documentary themselves. They actually paid Billy McFarlane, the con man, to be on the documentary, which some people said is kind of like an ethical dilemma. I didn't really have a problem with the fact that they paid him. It was part of the documentary. I mean, hearing directly from his voice, and he's sitting in this chair by himself, and he's blankly staring into the camera, and his tone, and he's definitely like a true scam con artist. That documentary is very interesting, although I'm going to talk about at the end of this podcast. The Hulu documentary, in my opinion, was extremely agenda driven, was extremely biased, and also, to me, came off very derogatory, ill-willed, and bashing of what they didn't know. But the reason I will get to that in a minute. But so these two documentaries came out last month or this month, and it was Hulu came out the same within a few days. The Netflix documentary came out. So I watched the Netflix documentary, started taking some notes, watched the Hulu documentary. Ended up having to pause it about 20 times because I was getting frustrated and animated and just disappointed a little bit in it. And I took notes during the Hulu documentary. I then decided to go back and like read some blog posts, go back and look at some of the tweets and things that have been sent out via the event itself. And then I took a stab and said, I want to watch the Netflix documentary again and the Hulu documentary again, but this time completely from a business sense. Take my emotion of the event out, the emotion of the documentary out, and I took a bunch of notes around the event itself and what people were talking about, and then I kind of compared that to what I could read online. And so I'm going to try to break this down. First, I'm going to talk about the business lessons for this event, some of the things that were really good that haven't been really highlighted, and some of the things that were really bad, but if you twist them or you understand why they were bad, you can still take lessons learned on it. And then at the end of this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about the documentaries as a whole and really where I think they went wrong and where I think we can learn from that as well. So first, let's just kind of talk about the business lessons of the Fyre Festival and put this in perspective. What for those that don't realize this is, Billy McFarlane and Ja Rule were launching an app, and they were creating an app to book elite talent called the Fyre app. And the Fyre app was going to help people book celebrities or musicians for their birthday parties, their weddings. And so you could get on this app and you could book my favorite artist is Dave Matthews, right? I could book Dave Matthews to come to my wedding or to my birthday party. And that's what the premise of this app was built for. And honestly, the premise of the app sounds kind of genius. I think there is a massive disconnect when it comes to booking talent and figuring out how all of those things work. Also, like the legality behind it. Also for the bands and those that are doing it, how they can make all the work. So like, there's a genius behind the app that was being created. And I would even say there's even a second level of genius, is that when they were thinking about promoting this app, when they were thinking about how they could get people to understand this app, they decided, hey, what we should do is we should throw a festival that would be the Fyre Festival. And ultimately, this would be part of our marketing of the app itself. And it would help us grow the Fyre brand so that when they launch the app itself, that the two of them can kind of play off of each other. And I have to say, this is genius. This part of it is genius. If you think about it, they have an app that is, really trying to market towards those people that want to hire, to create an experience, and you want to hire talent to come to your experience. Why not create a festival that brings talent and people together, and you kind of have like an offshoot of the app, but you can also build one of the two off the brand. And I think, for so many brands that are out there, they think about selling and they only talk about their product, or if they have a new app, all you talk about is the app itself. But to build a brand, you also have to create kind of a culture around this. And Billy McFarlane, who was the founder of this, he started this other product of this company called Magnesis. And Magnesis was what they called a millennial credit card, which I don't even like the term millennial credit card, but they had a credit card that was that would use your existing credit card, but as you use this Magnesis card, it would give you exclusive benefits, but it would also give you access to this community and this loft townhouse in New York City. And it was all about personalization, exclusivity, and giving people more for the money they were already spending. And so Billy had launched this credit card, this credit card that had been really successful, or quote unquote really successful. And then they were working with Ja Rule on this app, and they decided they wanted to start and launch this festival. Now, first of all, the idea of the festival is genius. The idea of linking these two is genius. One of the things I think they first made, one of their biggest mistakes, was they wanted to do it in a short time frame. And I don't remember what the exact number was, but like 8 months or 10 months time frame, they wanted to create this event. Then they decided they wanted to have this on an island in the Bahamas, which not only is that adding more difficulty, but now you have to go out of the country. Now you have to go to an area that doesn't have great connectivity, doesn't have great running water, all of those type of things. And so I think the idea itself was genius. The first mistake they made was trying to have this a massively short timeline, and nobody really talked about why they had such a short timeline. I'm not sure if that was part of the scam that Billy was running, but I think that was a major mistake they made. The second major mistake they made was trying to do that in a remote island. The third one was they're not event people, right? Ja Rule was an artist and a rapper, and Billy McFarland, for what he was being known as an entrepreneur, venture capitalist that had launched some things that had some good investors, but neither one of them were event specialists. So not only was it going to be impossible to turn out an event in that short amount of time, but they would needed to hire true event professionals and do so with 18 months or 2 years worth of lead time to launch this kind of event. So these type of things these were ultimately the funny part about this whole thing is those mistakes on the early end ended up being why the event failed, not what everyone highlighted in these documentaries. Documentaries blamed influencer marketing, stupid millennials for spending their stupid money on a stupid experience. They blamed it on the fact that, that there was all of these behind the scene things. They blamed it on pretty much everything other than the fact that really the idea was smart. The strategy of linking these two was smart. It was just the fact that you, tried to do it on a remote island, and they even made the claim that they bought the island that Pablo Escobar was on, which was just another lie. But all of these, those were mistakes they made at the beginning that I believe caused the end to be so bad. But the interesting part, and just wrap your head around this, after I watched the documentaries a second time, I sat back and I started asking myself, if they had spent 18 to 24 months creating this event, and if they had hired event professionals that were good at putting on first-time events, maybe even in remote locations, how would this entire story have been different? Because I'm going to walk you through some of the other business lessons, and some of them are super successful business lessons that if the final product had been delivered as it was being promised, it would have been, this would have been looked at as one of the greatest case studies of the millennial time frame as far as digital marketing and social media and so on. So just keep that in mind throughout this podcast, or even if you go back and watch the documentaries, there is an element of saying, wow, the genius behind this to start off with was super smart. And I would even argue that it didn't become a con until it got further down the line. So first off, that's kind of how I'm going to paint the picture to begin with. And now I want to walk through some of the business lessons, and I have them broken down into subcategories, so I'm going to break them each down for you guys here. And so the first one is collaboration, right? So they came up with this plan of the festival, but first off, the fact that they were bringing people together from different walks of life was genius, right? They have the Silicon Valley entrepreneur in Billy McFarland. They have Ja Rule, which is an artist that has massive exposure and many connections, and he has a name recognition. And then they also teamed up with influencers, and they teamed up with venture capitalists that also had very good trust and rapport. And so if you're a company, or you're an app startup, or you're a small business, this is genius, right? This is super smart to, hey, let's combine our forces, and not only are we going to have better reach, but we're going to have more visibility. We're going to have more connection into things that are going on. And so this I thought was super smart from the beginning, right? The next piece of this that I thought was crazy smart was they hired the best agencies they could. So they went out and hired Fuck Jerry, which is known as Jerry Media, who's known for making a big splash when it comes to influencer marketing and social media campaigns. They've one of the best of the best. So they went out and hired them. They also went out eventually and hired a really good event marketing agency, or an event execution agency. Unfortunately, the event agency was hired too far down the line, and it was too hard to actually pull off the event. But the other piece of this, so when we were looking at this, they hired the best of the best. So if you want to do something that is crazy, outlandish, and innovative, you want to launch the first festival in the Bahamas, and it's going to be tied to your event app, and you're going to create this amazing experience, you're going to want to hire the best of the best. And I give them kudos for doing so, right? And like that's part of the thing where I think a lot of brands do this wrong, is they want to create an experience. They want to they believe in execution. They understand what role social media and influencer marketing will play, but then they don't invest the money on hiring experts to execute it, right? They don't hire a great agency, or they don't hire a great strategy company to actually execute this. Now, I will say, one of the other mistakes that, and I'm going to talk a lot about lots of mistakes that Billy McFarland made. The guy Grant, who was hired as their chief marketing officer, he wasn't really a marketing genius, and he really wasn't an event genius. He was just a guy that threw out a bunch of big ideas. And the more I could read into him, the more I just figured out that the guy didn't really know what he was doing. He was just kind of like watching a movie and then deciding what he wanted. He was a major mistake in there. But if we look at it, and we look at it from a this idea of how they started off, they had a great strategy, a great idea, and then they went and hired the best of the best. And I'm going to say this out of the gate. I believe what Jerry Media and that team executed from a strategy perspective was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And remember, I'm giving this from a business perspective. The people that got screwed out of their money, the people that went to the event and got scammed, I feel bad for you. And I understand that is very an emotional thing, but I'm taking the emotional out of this, and I'm saying, what can we learn from a business sense? And the execution of the strategy that Jerry's Media's team had actually done is really, really good. And I'm going to talk about that. I mean, from a social strategy, from a influencer marketing strategy. Now, yes, they did some things that I would say are questionable in a strategy perspective, but it was the client that made them do that, not them giving that direction. And sometimes, unfortunately, when you're the agency or you're downstream, you end up doing things that you're directed to by the client because you're already invested, you're already part of that team, and that's neither here nor there. So they hired the best of the best. They decided to collaborate, outside of that arena. They even brought in some event professionals and kind of tapped into that piece. And they really focused on selling the experience. And so the documentary series, the Netflix documentary series, really highlighted a lot of this, and this is where I'm going to get a lot of this information from. But the documentary series from Netflix really focused on this promotional video that they created, or they called it a commercial. I wouldn't even really call it a commercial. It was really a promo video, in which they brought a bunch of the celebrities and they brought a bunch of the models down to this island that at the time they were claiming to own, and they were claiming that was Pablo Escobar's. Little did we learn later on that not only did they not own that island, but that wasn't the island that they were actually going to be on for the event. But that's neither here nor there when I'm talking about this at the beginning, is that that first strategy said, hey, let's throw a festival that will help grow our brand around our app. That's genius. Let's hire an event, or let's hire agencies that are the best of the best. That's genius. How are we going to highlight this new experience? We're going to do a video shoot at this location, and we're going to provide people kind of like a behind-the-scenes preview of what they're going to experience, and we're going to tap into the emotional element. We're going to tap into the fear of missing out. We're going to tap into the power of these influencers that are there, and we're just going to document this on video, and we're going to make this video the cornerstone of our marketing around this experience. This is genius. If you want to use social video in 2018, 2019, and beyond, this is genius, because it wasn't a sales pitch. It wasn't Ja Rule getting up on stage just talking about it. It wasn't, Facebook ads in everybody's face. What they decided to do was to, hire this film crew and create this amazing commercial. And yes, the commercial shows models swimming with the pigs in the water, and it shows the yachts, and it shows this amazing experience. But remember, that's what they were selling, and that's at the time what they planned on executing. And so this video, in my opinion, was geniusly made. It taps into all of the emotional elements of what they are trying to execute on the back end. And they did so in, using familiar faces, right? If you didn't trust Ja Rule and you didn't know who Billy McFarland was, when you saw and recognized some of the famous models or actors or even YouTube creators that were part of this, you started to be like, oh, I know those people, and they're part of this this, this promo video. I want to learn more about this, right? And I think that was such a genius play, and they did a great job. The storytelling in the video itself is so good. You guys should watch the promo video because, yes, the execution of what they sold wasn't what that video actually entailed, but the video itself is a great element of storytelling. And it's not talking about the bands that much. It's not talking about the actual event. It's bringing people behind the scenes. It's allowing you to say, like, hey, don't you want to be a part of this? And that's such a great job of videoing. And I would also say part of one of the other things that they did really smart was they brought film crews around, and they had a film crew on Billy and the inner circle 24 hours a day, 7 days a week throughout this process. So they have this exclusive video. And that's another thing that not enough companies are doing, just documenting everything. And because you never know what you can use. And even within that commercial, they used a bunch of documented B-roll film that I bet you if they had just strategically set out to capture the commercial, they probably would have never got that B-roll film. So that's something that we can learn as well from a video creation that is extremely powerful is, how do I link this together? How do I create, bring this whole story of this experience together? And I thought they did an amazing job of that in this promotional video, if you can set aside the fact that it actually never happened, the execution on the back end never happened. And then we take it another step further. So they brought models in to record this promotional video, but then they went a step further and they really tapped into influencer marketing. And they made the claim that they actually tapped into over 400 influencers. And this is another one of those strategies that they did really well, is it wasn't just travel influencers and it wasn't just models, but they went after content creators on YouTube. They went after celebrities. They went after musicians. They went after, actors. And one of the things that I thought that if you look at it, if you look at the list of people that they use as influencers, I believe the influencer marketing strategy would not have been successful if they had just used one vertical, if they had just only hired models, or if they had only hired certain celebrity types or only musicians. Because they went with such a breadth of 400 influencers, that was an extremely smart play because the virality, the opportunity for unique eyeballs was right there, prime for the taking. And so the influencer marketing strategy that was built for this project was genius. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the downsides of this and the things that we should learn as a result of the bad side of this. But you have to first look at it and say, okay, well, it was genius that they did 400. It was also genius that they went across multiple different verticals. Every company that I work with from an influencer marketing strategy, I always tell them that you need people from 4 different locations. You need a celebrity, you need someone that's a subject matter expert, you need someone that is a thought leader, and then you need someone that is a trusted resource that is close in proximity to the person, which is sometimes your current customer or your fan. So I always say you need those 4 types of influencers in any influencer marketing campaign. And they did that really well. They brought in these 400 influencers. The other thing that I thought they did really uniquely was, in the influencer marketing game, just putting a product behind somebody. DJ Khaled has a Pepsi bottle behind them. That doesn't really do much. I mean, consumers are pretty smart today. We know when we see product placement that the person putting the product behind them, for the most part, are getting paid for it. But what they did was they coordinated with all of these influencers to drop a orange tile, just an orange picture on Instagram at the exact same time, tagging the festival. And when you clicked on the orange tile, it would actually open the promotional commercial video that they had recorded previously. And this is, let's think about this from an influencer marketing strategy. If you want to garner attention, you have to do things differently. A blank orange tile on an influencer's account that is usually pictures and videos and styles, or maybe it's music, really makes you question, what the hell is this, right? It's thumb-stopping content, right? So the fact that they did it as an orange tile is first a genius thing, something we all must think about when we're doing influencer marketing. How can my influencer's content stand out? The second part of this that I thought was genius is not only was it the orange tile, but every one of those people that posted that orange tile, the link out and the call to action wasn't a sales page. It was directing them to this commercial video, which that video video then tapped into, because if you clicked on the orange tile, you're like, why did they post this? You clicked on it and then the video played, and now you're immersed in this experience that you're like, ooh, why did this influencer share this video? So now it's getting you to ask questions and want to learn more. And the video kind of plays through, and at the end, it gives the URL, the fyrefestival.com website, and each one of the influencers included the hashtag as well as the website in their Instagram post. Which, again, is genius, because not only for many people, I remember this, I saw the orange tile multiple times because I was following multiple of these influencers' accounts. And I was like, by the second or third orange tile I saw, I was like, what the heck is this? And then I clicked on it and I watched it. And I remember thinking like, oh, wow, that seems like amazing. Now, I'm not financially at the place, especially at the time, to make that kind of investment. But I was very interested, and it led me to their website. And remember, with influencer marketing, part of the genius behind influencer marketing is a trusted resource, right? We trust people that look like us. We trust people that are human much more than we do a brand, right? If it was just the Fyre brand logo promoting this, nobody would have clicked on it. And the other part of this is, if the influencer just sent you to a stale website that was very disconnected from the experience, that would not have worked either. But if you look at what really worked here, it was the orange tile made people stand out. It was multiple orange tiles coordinated at the exact same time, which made people really stand out. And then the third part of this is it went to a video that captured the experience. And then the fourth element beyond that is the ticket prices were a little high, and they were also only selling a certain amount of tickets. So now not only did they get somebody's attention, then they captured their attention, and then they maintained that attention throughout the video. Then they get them on the website, and now it's their job to close them. And the tactics they used to close them was a little bit of fear of missing out, a little bit of exclusivity, but also this idea of, if you want to be a part of something never done before, you need to get in on this now. And this is a genius influencer marketing strategy across the board, right? So not only is that smart, but the other part of this that was genius that I think was left off was those models and people that they sent down to the island to create the commercial video. They allowed them to take pictures on the island, and they allowed them to create content. And the influencers wanted to go do these, excursion where they got to swim with the pigs, and they allowed them to go do that. And one of the things that I talk about, that we want to learn from this is that how do you work with influencers? And part of the things that I thought they did really well is they gave influencers exclusive access to the event, the pre-party, right? This event where they shot the commercial. Well, now the influencer feels extra special. They have even more reason to promote this event, right? They also allowed the influencers to help dictate the experience that the influencer wanted. So now not only is the influencer getting something exclusive, but they're allowing, they know that this brand cares about them, right? That the brand is taking them and doing things for them that they really want to happen. The other part of this is the influencers were enabled to be themselves, right? And one of the examples where one of the models there at the video shoot did the mannequin challenge, which we all know the mannequin challenge in 2016 went viral, where everybody did a video where everyone in the room was frozen, and they did that while at the Fyre Festival, right? So not only was this about the Fyre Festival, but now these models are tapping into a trending topic and a trending movie while being at an influencer event. That is also genius, because now it's not just talking about the Fyre Festival, but it's bringing people that are tracking the mannequin challenge into understand, okay, well, why are all these models together? Oh, what is this Fyre Festival, right? So you're tying things on beyond the brand. And then the other part of this is they were very good at coordinating and mandating that the influencers were using the hashtags. The influencers were tagging the brand, right? Oftentimes, with influencer marketing, you have to keep it simple, stupid. You have to make sure that if an influencer is there doing something, that they know what to tag and how things are going to be measured. And I thought they did a great job of doing that. And then the other part of this around influencers is they didn't reward every influencer the same, right? Some, yes, they paid $200,000 for Kylie Jenner to post the post. To me, I don't think that'll ever happen again at that level. And that's just asinine for that amount of money. But some people they paid money for, some people they tapped into their network, and then other people, they told them that, hey, I'll bring you to the festival itself and I'll give you a private cottage if you're willing to promote this ahead of time. And I think this is another lesson learned, is that not all influencers are created equal. Not all influencers have the same value to your brand, and not all influencers should be incentivized the same way. And I think if we start looking at influencer marketing and the lessons learned for this event, we can start thinking, wow, like they did that really well, right? They coordinated these 400 people. They all dropped the tile at the same time, but they also gave them behind the scenes access. They also made them feel like they're part of the event. They also allowed them to kind of get, witness what was in the making. And these are all strategies that are amazing. And I believe it's why it worked, right? It wasn't just an orange tile. It wasn't just because a celebrity did it. It was because it was a well-coordinated effort. It was a strategy with a plan behind it. It had a call to action that made sense. It went to a video. It didn't go to a stale landing page. And then when people went to the website, it was also a very smart landing page website that captured people's emotions of feeling like, damn, I want to be there. Because that's usually a disconnect with influencer marketing, where you have the influencer get people's attention, you give them a piece of content that their audience is consuming, but when they get to a landing page, you kind of drop the ball. You're just selling them or marketing them. And I think when you're painting this whole picture together, you have to truly build that rapport and that experience across the board. And so I thought this was genius. It was a genius use of social media, the hashtags, the promotion leading up to it, showing behind the scenes. Now, if we look at this as a whole, this is where we're working, right? Okay, influencer marketing was what they leveraged to get the buzz out there, to create the fear of missing out, really to drive some amazing awareness. This is all really powerful, and this is proof that it works. Now, there's some lessons we can take about it that was done incorrectly. There's some advice that we have for influencers on making sure that the brands you're working with are people that you trust. But let's set this groundwork, is that influencer marketing, the reason it works today is not because, and like this is where the Hulu documentary really painted a bad picture of influencers. I mean, here's the thing. All of the brands, most brands, if not all brands, have alienated customers, especially that millennial generation. We lived through the .com boom. We've lived through fake news and scammy news. We've lived through people selling unicorns and rainbows. And so we trust people that are people, right? People we can associate a name with, and we build that. And so here's the thing to remember in this whole influencer marketing game. Yes, a lot of these influencers were wrong because they promoted something that either they weren't a part of or they didn't know about. But here's the thing. With great power comes great responsibility, said Spider-Man. Influencers are only influential because of the trust that they have with their community. It doesn't matter the number of followers. Some have more scale of that trust than others. But influence, and I always have to define this anytime I talk influencer marketing. To be influential is you can't just have an audience. You have to have a trust with that audience, so much so that people are willing to take action based on your actions, your endorsement, or your connections, or what you're doing, right? So someone is influential because of that trust. Now, if you work with a brand or you work with somebody and it falls on its face, you lose that trust. Therefore, you lose your influence. Right? You don't lose your celebrity status. You don't all of a sudden lose all of your followers. But hell yes, the next time you promote something, those people that trusted you that time and you violated that trust are no longer going to trust you, or they're going to ask more questions. And so when people were kind of sharing blame on this whole thing, they were blaming the influencers and talking about, and here's the thing, the influencers are paying for it because their name was associated with something that failed. And now they're not as trusted as they were before they were associated with that brand, right? And I've always said this. For me, there's no brand I will work with if they make me do something that I either am not comfortable with, that is outside my purview. I will not be a part of that program. But not all influencers think that way. And in this world we've been living in, a lot of influencers have made their status, they've grown their brand. They've been faking it till they make it, right? They were early adopters of YouTube, maybe early adopters on Snapchat and Vine. Maybe they were just, really good at faking things online. And you know what? Kudos to them, because on the early days, that's kind of what worked, and a lot of people did that. But In today's day and age, if you were to say you're going to be a really powerful influencer, and I'm going to start growing your audience today, right now in 2019, none of those old tactics work. None of them work. Now you have to build trust and rapport through what you do, who you are, what you say, what you don't say, the things that you endorse, the things that you don't endorse. Transparency is much more apparent now, and people have to be on video. You can't be scamming or selling, claiming things that you're not. And so not only have consumers smartened up, but the way an influencer builds their audience today is much more grassroots, much more organic, much more dialed in. And so I don't blame the influencers that did it the other way, but let's just remember, once they lose that trust, they lose their power of influence. And once they lose that power of influence, then they lose the amount that they can generate for those endorsements. And so these are things we just kind of have to keep in mind. We also have to remember there's a difference between a celebrity endorsement and an influencer that is someone that is trusted by a community. Maybe they host a podcast. Maybe they have a YouTube channel like my good friend Amy Landino. That's a different level of influencers, and they each have their value, right? Celebrity influencers usually give you word of mouth, give you massive chance of getting exposure, which is what happened in this case. But there's another levels of influencers that are really powerful at doing some more amazing things at a more micro level. And I think what this event exposed is that influencer marketing is here to stay. It is extremely powerful. It freaking works. This event is proof, but it can also work to highlight someone that's conning on the back end. It can also work for influencers that don't understand the value of trust. It can also work in a way that could ruin an influencer's brand, right? So these are things that I think we have to kind of take into account. And remember, there was venture capitalists and the employees of the company that didn't understand what was going on, and they were scammed out of their money. They had no idea that the Fyre Festival was a fraud. And if the employees and the venture capitalists didn't understand or didn't have enough information of what's going on, how the hell would an influencer have had that much insight, right? So I don't blame the influencers. I know that their trust with their community has been violated. They've lost some trust. They have some things that they're going to have to build back up, and that's penalty enough. But it wasn't on them to go, to be blamed for the failure of this event, because let's face it, from all that they had access to, this event was going to be everything that they were promised and more. And I think that's something you kind of have to, kind of see when we go out there. And so that's kind of my take on the influencer marketing aspect of the event and the selling of it. And so if you think about it now, they launched it. They had this great strategy. They were doing it in a way too short of a timeline. But now they're getting word of mouth and they're getting buzz. And so they're of course trying to execute it on the back end, which is a whole nother piece of it. But I really want to tap into some other factors around this, because not only were they using social video and they were using hashtags to promote it, and they were really trying to highlight a lot of what was going on, but they also they understood that if they don't pull this off, that it's going to be a massive failure because of social media, right? I would argue, and I want you to think about this, I would argue the risk was also just as high because they used influencers and social media. They were risking everything, because if it failed, people would be tweeting and blasting it out there immediately, which they ended up doing, right? And this is one of those weird things where, think about it for Woodstock, right? Woodstock, if social media was around during Woodstock, when Woodstock first was launched, would Woodstock have the same reputation it has today? Or would there have been outrage at the cars that had to park on the highway, the lack of bathrooms and foods, the drugs and the diseases that were being spread around? Well, no, if you think about it, Woodstock ended up being about this freedom experience of people coming together and doing something that had never done before. But the fact that social media wasn't a part of it allowed them to really kind of hide or not amplify the bad and really just show the highlights and show the musicians and use it as a movement. And I would say that's when people look at social media and they always say, well, social media is so bad and social media, all these bad things will happen. Well, here's the thing. If there wasn't for social media, the Fyre Festival would have been a shit show. It would have failed miserably, but very little people would have known about it, right? And so social media not only has great power in the front end, but it also creates that risk at a higher level on the back end. And that's something to kind of keep in mind as we're kind of thinking about the lessons that we can learn from this. The other part of this is I think we have to take a lesson in experience marketing, right? One of the things I thought that they did really well, and some of it was scammy, but some of it was just the way they did it, is they were selling an experience. Therefore, part of the experience was you're getting exclusive access to something you can't get anywhere else. And if you guys listen to this podcast, you know that my number one tip for people when they're creating content today, especially video content or story content, is provide access to something that someone cannot get anywhere else. Now, in the Hulu documentary, they were bashing it like, oh, stupid millennials are willing to spend their money on anything that look good on their Instagram. And they were really bashing that consumer. But let's face it, today's consumer wants to buy, I want to spend my money on experiences much more than I want to buy a product, right? I want the experience more than a product. So if you're selling an experience, you need to understand the power of experience marketing. And I thought they did this greatly, right? They even talked about, hey, we're going to give you a private plane that's going to give you to the island for this great experience. Well, now it's another new experience. Not only is it this first of a time festival, but it'll be your first time on a private plane. Holy crap, that's another new experience. They initially sold it as you're going to be on Pablo Escobar's island. Well, holy crap, now that gives me something even cooler to be at, because I can tell my friends, not only did I spend my money to go to this great event that had these great musicians and I got to fly on a private plane, but I was on Pablo freaking Escobar's island. And take it for what you want. Yes, he was a bad, horrible person that did bad, horrible things, but there is an element of there's lots of bad, horrible things that we want to be a part of to amplify or be connected to or highlight. I mean, that's what history is all about. Like every time someone takes a picture in front of a monument or a statue, there's an element of bad or good, or one side lost, one side won to that. So they tapped into that from an experience perspective, but they also were tapping into experience marketing to really understand their consumer. And I think this is one of those lessons that everyone out there has to take a step back. Billy McFarland is a con man. He sells unicorns and rainbows. He screwed millions of people out, or thousands of people out of their money, out of their time. But one of the things that he really got was it was more important than anything to understand his target audience and provide his target audience with what they wanted. He wasn't trying to present this towards the baby boomers. He wasn't trying to even present this towards the Gen Z. He wasn't trying to present this towards the poor or the rich. He really dialed in on his consumer, and he understood what they wanted, why they wanted it. And he even went as far at one point when he wanted to kind of get more money. He went and sold wristbands, and the wristbands where you could put money on your wristband because it was going to be a cashless experience, and you just upload your money to a wristband and you can pay for all of your things on your wristband. And they said 2 million people, or there was $2 million people uploaded to these wristbands. And to me, this is genius, because the people that you're targeting that want to buy an experience, they also want simplicity. They want an experience where they fly on a private jet, they get bused to an event, they don't have to worry about money, they just have it on their wristband, they don't have to worry about bags, they don't have to worry about all these things. So if you're going to sell an experience, you have to do things along the way that also enable a good experience. And those wristbands were part of it. Now, the fact that he did it because he was behind on money and that was his only way of raising money, yes, that's shady. But you have to look at it from a marketing perspective. And the reason it worked is because that audience that he was already tapping into was already in that mindset of getting a part of that, right? Like if your audience was there to buy a product, or they were flying there for some certain, one-off, thing that you had going on, they're not going to add money to a wristband because that's not part of the value proposition that they're buying into. But that what they were buying into was super important. And the fact that the team actually knew that, I thought was also genius. They also did a good job of tapping into what I call FOMO marketing. And you guys are listening to the FOMOfanz podcast right now, so you know that my take overall on FOMO. But here's the thing, and I'm gonna have a full episode. It might be the next episode or 2 episodes from now. I'm gonna do a whole episode dedicated to the dark side of FOMO and why I don't believe FOMO should be used always. And honestly, the reason I created this podcast was to cure your fear of missing out, right? I don't want to invoke FOMO on this podcast. I want to cure it. And so I think people sometimes get that confused. They think that I believe FOMO can be used for everything. Now, I think strategically using FOMO has been a marketing tactic for forever, right? Hey, there's only 20 VIP seats left. The reason you tell people there's only 20 VIP seats left when there's really 200 is because you want to invoke that idea that I have to buy it now or I'm going to be missing out, right? And so they did that at the Fyre Festival. They showed that the general admission tickets were sold out early, so people would buy the VIP tickets. The other thing about FOMO when it comes to leveraging it from a social media perspective, when something becomes sold out, it empowers people that are already bought a ticket to feel even more exclusive and more lucky, and they're more willing to advertise and market that than if it's something that anyone can go to, right? If tickets are still available all the way up to the day of the show, someone is a lot less likely to talk about that event or that experience because they just know that anyone can go. But if something is exclusive and they were the ones that got in early, hell yes, they're going to talk about it more. They're going to share it out more. It's going to become much more of a viral thing. And so they tapped into that really nicely. Now, I will say they used FOMO for ill will. I also think they did some things that were really bad around FOMO. They deleted all of the Instagram comments that were bad. They even set up a filter on Instagram to where you couldn't ask questions about the event, so that they would block people from commenting. Those are all things that are horrible. And I think lying to your consumer is not the same as FOMO. And I also think with FOMO, you have to know when it works and when it's valuable and when it's not working and when it's stupid. And I will say, every one of the people that sell online courses right now, I believe they overuse FOMO. Everyone that sells events, in my opinion, overuses FOMO. I mean, every week the event, if you don't buy the ticket now, you're going to miss out on $200 off. And then the next week is $189 off. Like, if you want people to have that fear of missing out, you have to strategically use it, but you have to understand the risk versus reward. And so I'm going to do a whole episode on the dark side of it. I'm going to talk a little bit about some examples. I'm going to talk about when to use it, when not to use it. But I also think they use that fairly well. Now, if we're bringing this whole full circle, right? What happened was they created all this buzz. They got all these people to fly down there. The event's a complete failure. All of the bands back out. People can't get their luggage. They don't even have a place to sleep. All of the people that had been working on the project, all of the day laborers that were working 24 hours a day, were scammed. They didn't get their money. The lady who ran the restaurant that was down there that put up all of the workers as well as all of the initial people that went to the event, that person was never paid. The car rental places were never paid. The rental houses were never paid. Like, these are all, like, that's just a scam. That's just horrible, right? But there's also a lesson to be learned here on crisis management. And I'm going to have my good friend, Melissa Agnes. She's a crisis expert. She wrote the book Crisis Ready. She's actually going to come on the show over the next couple of weeks. And we're going to talk about crisis management a little bit on how this works with experience marketing. We're going to talk about how it works with today's social media. She's a really good, close friend of mine, one of my best friends. But she's going to talk a little bit about the Fyre Festival as well. I made sure that she's going to watch the documentaries because the way that they handled the crisis around this was horrible. They knew that social media was the reason that the event went viral and people signed up. They also knew that people were going to post about it on social media if it failed. But when it did fail, rather than realizing that, they tried to send cease and desist letters. They tried to block people. They tried to hide the information. And that, in this day and world, that is mistake central. That cooked them. That's what ended them completely, because if they would have owned it and they would have put it out there and kind of jumped in front of things and tried to make it right, there was a possibility of them saving face and it not turning into the lawsuits that became of this, or even the documentaries that came of it. Because in today's day and age, people want to know that you care about them and they want to be a part of something. But when they're a part of something that's bad, they want the people that are running that to own it. They want them to not only own their mistakes, but they want them to publicly put out and apologize and acknowledge the downside of it. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. And so I'm going to talk a lot more about the crisis management side of this on a future episode. But that's just something that I think we have to, really just be sad about as far as the way that they handle the crisis. Now, the good side of this is I've always believed that there's so much good in this world that if good people are doing good things and something bad happens to them, that good people will rally around them. And so if you guys saw, maybe you didn't see, but Marianne Roll, who was the owner of the restaurant, she lost $100,000 or so of her money because Billy McFarland and them never paid her for all of the food and the workers that she put out. And after the Netflix documentary came out, the Netflix team helped her launch a GoFundMe account that ended up raising $180,000 as of this moment. So I think it's $183,000 from people, even the agencies, the marketing agency behind the event actually donated all of their profits to Marianne to help fund her. There's actually a second GoFundMe account that just launched recently that's trying to raise $400,000 for the workers of the Bahamas that also did not get paid, the day laborers that were working overnight on the site. So there's a second. So I think this is something that is another element of good that came out of, right? The documentaries highlighted the scam, but Netflix did an amazing job of also, kind of humanizing it and saying, like, people get duped all the time. And I believe Ja Rule played a part in this, but I also think he was conned by Billy McFarland. I think the venture capitalists were conned, right? Even a lot of people in the inner circle were conned. And when all these people are conned, the good people that put themselves out there and trusted Billy, I love seeing that people are coming together to raise money and raise awareness and really help these people out. And so I think that is something to be said. It's something that's very powerful, and it's something that I love being seen. And so that's kind of how I looked at the true business lessons of this event is that, yes, influencer marketing and influencers need to be better at disclosing their involvement with brands. Yes, influencers can be used to highlight something that ended up not being executed, but there's so much good strategy and so much great information that can be learned from this. And I think it actually highlights the power of social media, the power of influencer marketing, understanding today's millennial consumer more so than anything else, right? And I think that's something that we have to kind of take a look at. Now, when it comes to the documentaries, I believe the Netflix documentary did a great job of using real live footage from the event, from all the different people that are on their team, as well as different social media people's video to really give you a sense of what was going on. I believe the Hulu documentary focused on interviewing Billy McFarland and then shifting the agenda and really shifting the blame to blaming influencer marketing, blaming social media, and really bashing millennial generation as a whole. And I'm going to go off a little bit about this. I'm going to try to keep this short. I know this is a longer episode. But one of the things you have to kind of look at is, Billy McFarland, although he was a con man, yes, he's in jail and he should be in jail and he screwed all these people out of money. There are lots of things you can even learn from Billy on why it all worked, right? He's a confident and good sales guy. He understood the importance of documenting everything that he was doing. He hired video teams to document all of these things that gave him great power when it came to marketing and hiring a marketing team. He had a group of trusted advisors around him that gave him more credibility than he deserved, right? Venture capitalists that were investing in him that were, maybe you didn't trust Billy, but you're like, oh, well, if that venture capitalist invested in him, then they must be good, right? Or if that band signed up for them, they must be good, right? And the funny thing is, the Hulu documentary bashed the hell out of the influencers, but they didn't say anything about the musicians that signed up for this, that signed up to get paid for this event, that promoted it on their website, that ended up backing out of the event completely, right? Like, if they were going to blame the influencers, shouldn't they have blamed the musicians just as much as the influencers? But of course they didn't, because of the kind of the shift or the agenda of blaming what they don't understand. And then the other part of this is understanding, today's emotional consumer, right? And I think one of the pieces that I really was appalled by, and I think both documentaries took a stab at this, is they were making fun of the people that spent their money to go on this experience. And to me, this is a horrible element of our culture. Horrible element of our culture. The fact that we are making fun and bashing how other people spend their money is ridiculous. Because guess what? They earned that money. They worked for that money. They got it through a trust fund. However they got that money, it's their right to spend it on whatever the hell they want. And it's funny because we're like, wow, these people were duped. They wanted to go on a private island and they wanted to be a part of something new. Here's the thing. All great inventions, every great experience, every great movement, from Coachella to Woodstock to anything that's ever good that's happened in the world from a standpoint of crazy innovation, even the women's marches or the Me Too movement, it came from people that were willing to do something outlandish, people that were willing to take a chance, people that were willing to put all their chips out there and say, screw it, I want to be a part of something great. And you know what? All of those movements happened and were part of the amazingness because people were willing to risk that. And you know what? Unfortunately, people were willing to risk that to be a part of this event that didn't happen. But that's one bad apple. The fact that we're willing to make fun of and laugh at how people spend their money, I like to say, screw you, right? When someone tells, I owned a home for many years, and then I decided I no longer wanted to be a homeowner because I didn't like being house poor. And I'd rather spend my money traveling and giving my daughters experiences like taking them to the movies and taking them to trampoline parks than I did having a house that was a long-term investment because I don't even know how long I want to live somewhere. And I believe everyone has the right to spend their money on whatever the hell they want to. And the fact that we want to make fun of that and saying oh my goodness, all these people wanted to go down on this island all because they want to take selfies and put it on Instagram. So what? If that's how you want to spend your money, if you want to spend your money renting an airplane that doesn't get off the ground and take pictures of it and post it on your Instagram, I got no problem with that, because you know what? You're faking it, you'll get exposed, and that's perfectly fine. But if that's how you want to spend your money, kudos to you. And I think making fun of the audience that was there and really labeling them as millennials is part of the whole generational problem. I'm a proud millennial, but oftentimes I talk about the millennial shortcomings and things that millennials are doing wrong and things that millennials need to learn. And I often talk about the disconnect. And this is a massive disconnect. Just because someone spends their money and values something differently than you do doesn't mean it's wrong, doesn't mean they should be scammed, doesn't mean they should be taken advantage of. And honestly, it doesn't even mean that they have a higher likelihood of being scammed or taken advantage of. Every one of the people, I would argue, a majority of the people that were bashing millennials for going on this experience and taking this big risk and going on this island just to hang out with celebrities are also the same people that invested in the .com boom, that were investing in all of these companies to try to get rich quickly, and then realized all of a sudden that all these companies were full of crap and the bottom fell out. They took just as much risk and ultimately just looked as much foolish as the people that were going on this island. And so I think the shaming that existed, making fun of how people spent their money, I think is kind of sad and disgusting. And I think it separates us more. It's why, most brands struggle at reaching a younger generation. If you don't like how they spend their money, if you don't appreciate that, if you're not willing to provide what they want to spend their money on, there's no wonder they're not buying from you, right? They want to, and that's something that, this is something that's really extremely, important to think about. I also think, in the Hulu documentary especially, they kept using terms like the millennial social media attendee, or Billy McFarland, the millennial elite CEO. And when you're putting those terms on them and you're only associating it with the bad, never once did they say they didn't say the Gen X or baby boomer lady who hosted all the people with the money, right? They didn't put a generation on the good people they highlighted in the stories. They only put a generation on the bad people they highlighted in the stories. And when you do that, it immediately comes across as us versus them. And if you want to learn from things, if you want to create a movement, if we want to make sure that it doesn't happen again, you can't tell people, you can't make it an us versus them conversation, because I can guarantee you there were Gen Xers there. There's probably baby boomers at this event. And it wasn't just a millennial thing. And if there was a majority of them that were millennials, it doesn't speak for every millennial. And the fact that we're labeling and we're putting that label on there and we're using it in such a derogatory term, it hurts us in marketing, it hurts us in business, and honestly, it hurts people in self-worth, because there are so many people in my community that say that they're embarrassed or shamed to be labeled a millennial, and this is the reason. It's because when something bad happens, we label that person as a millennial. When something does good, how many times do we hear Mark Zuckerberg called a millennial? Never is Mark Zuckerberg labeled the millennial billionaire, but yet he's highlighted as a great leader and doing all these amazing things. Yet we don't attach the millennial to that, because that's something good. We only want to attach the name millennial to those things that are bad. And I think the Hulu documentary should be ashamed at the way they presented that, the continually bashing, and then also the takes that they turned on influencers and social media. The people that they got as experts on that show are social media strategists and influencer people that don't understand the medium, and they want to use this one bad use case to break down an entire industry. I firmly believe that if people are watching that and they're not educated and they're not coming back and listening to my show or to other shows where you're kind of giving people an entire picture, you have to remember this was the one bad execution. Not the one, but this is one of very few bad executions. But ultimately, there's so many good examples and so many great things that have happened from it that if we only show and highlight and spend all of our documentary money on the bad, what does that do for any of us? And maybe, yes, it makes more people want to sign up for email marketing or makes more people scared of online. But guess what? Digital is coming. Influencer marketing isn't going away. Every business is in the business of trust. And in today's day and world, we have to make sure that we're providing a holistic view that helps us learn from something. Because even in that documentary, and yes, most documentaries shouldn't have a straight opinion. Hulu documentary was way more opinionated than Netflix. I think the Netflix one, through the real film and the emails that they had access to, allowed you to get a little bit better understanding of the event itself. It was, of course, a little bit slated to make the agency look good, a little bit slated to make the event team look good, but you can kind of see through that. The Hulu one came across as very... they were trying to put on a show. They are trying to almost make fun of the entire thing while also, shifting blame towards, even the agencies. They were blaming the agencies. They were blaming the influencers. They are blaming stupid people on social media. And if we continue to blame and point fingers like that in an us versus them mentality, I believe we will never move forward. And so I'm going to give you my final thoughts on this whole thing. I'm going to reference this again. I even might build a keynote around this as a use case. I gave you guys lots of business examples, and I've said this multiple times. I don't believe in what Billy McFarland did. I think he's a con man. I cannot stand when scam artists and people that are faking it become successful. It happens every single day. There are people selling online courses. There are people selling books. There are people selling get-rich schemes every single day in America, in the world today. Here's what I want. I want to educate consumers. I want to educate the people on helping us be smarter with our decisions so we don't give them the power. It gives us no value to keep bashing the scam artists if we're not giving people ideas and best practices and ways to not allow ourselves to be scammed. And hopefully that's what you guys got from this. I hope we can start educating consumers on ways to see through things and ways to do our own investigation. If you've bought something and it wasn't what it was appeared to be, I believe it's up to us as the consumers to do more research. I just bought a brand new vehicle, and I researched the vehicle for almost 30 days, and I called different vehicles. I read different forums. I was on Reddit. I was really diving deep, and I think it's up to us. But the bigger picture of this is, with every failed opportunity, there are ways that we can find lessons in there, but there's also ways that we can highlight the good. And I love seeing the social good. I love that people are raising money for those that got screwed out of the money. I hope Billy McFarland pays for it. But I also think in this world where we're building trust and the value of trust, there are layers in this story, in this strategy, that are amazing lessons that every brand, every business, even myself, I can tell you there's a couple of things that I'm going to be doing over the next couple of months that I'm going to take from lessons directly from this Fyre Festival, and I'm going to take them and implement them in my business. I'm going to start to be a little bit more strategic and understand a couple of these things. And I think that's the missing piece. Every blog that I wrote, every article, every people that were bashing, it seemed to be about blaming people. It seemed to be about making fun of people. It seemed to be a lot about, oh my goodness, millennial con man, millennials can fall into anything. And I believe in the world we're living in today, yes, social media will never stop bad people from doing bad things. Social media will never stop evil people from using it for bad, but I believe it has so much good, and there's the ability to do great things. And if you're a brand or a business that is creating an experience and you're not a con person and you're actually delivering on what you're talking about, your opportunity to succeed in 2019 and beyond is here today. It is powerful. It is living proof. And I believe everything I talked about in this very long episode can be implemented in your business today, and it is something that we should all learn from, we should be excited about. And I'm sorry for those that got scammed, but I'm very thankful that social media allowed us to get a peek behind the curtains, and we were able to learn from this. And as we grow, we will be better as consumers, we will be better marketers, we'll be better understand the power of influencer marketing. But ultimately, we should think about it as something good that came out of this, because its proof is out there. the way that if you listen to all my shows, the things that I'm preaching, understanding millennials, understanding consumer behavior, putting yourself in the shoes of your consumer, creating influencer content, building rapport, thinking about trust, stop selling your products, start selling your experiences, all of them are living proof in this example. I just wish Billy and their team had hired the right people 18 months out and actually executed on this festival on the back end, because it would have been highlighted today as one of the greatest examples of influencer marketing and social media ever. Unfortunately, he became a con at the end, and it didn't go off on the back end like it should have. So thank you guys so much for tuning in for this episode. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Just send me a tweet at iSocialFans. Let me know that you're listening to the Fyre Festival episode. Let me know your thoughts on this topic. Let me know your thoughts on what things you learned from, maybe what things you disagree with me on. But one thing I will ask you to do is, I don't want you to shame anyone. I don't want you to point fingers at people. I think for this lesson for me, it's about what can we learn from it? What can we take from it? What good can we take from it? What bad can we take from it? And also, how can we be better as creating documentaries? How can we be better as storytellers at being less jaded, less slanted? Stop putting a spin on something and start presenting something in a way that allows your audience to truly understand something. The Netflix documentary, I think, did a better job. It didn't do an amazing job. The Hulu documentary, I think, did a horrible job at doing that. But I also think they both kind of allowed us into a window into this story that allowed me to do this podcast episode. So thank you everybody for tuning in to FOMOfanz episode 91. My name is Brian Fanzo. As always, remember, go above and beyond to show people you care. If you care about people before they realize that they need you to care about them, life can lead to some amazing, powerful collaborations, and together we can do some great things together. My name is Brian Fanzo. Cheers, my friends. Make it a great day.